All right, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to our webinar this morning from Prestige Senior Living. My name is Angie France. I am so grateful that you are joining us today. We are very privileged to have Dr. Rob Winningham with us this morning to present on brain health in older adults. I have been with Prestige for 12 and a half years, and Dr. Rob has joined us in training and encouragement in this area of cognitive health for many years. He's been a great friend of ours at Prestige, and so we're grateful to have him with us. You know, Prestige has been in the senior living industry for well over 35 years, 38 coming up, I believe. And so we are always trying to be on the forefront, but most importantly, we're always trying to be a resource for those of you that contact us, that join us via webinars or tour our communities. We are so happy that we get to have this wonderful advantage of Zoom and Facebook Live for you to join us. We certainly learned a lot during the pandemic with webinars and how to host them and be that resource for you. You know, Prestige has many communities throughout the Northwest and the West Coast. We have 43 assisted living communities, I believe now 40 skilled nursing centers and 21 memory care centers. And we just are so grateful to be able to serve the needs of older adults wherever they may find their lives. We also serve residents who are independent living, who want a safe place to live, to be able to enjoy life every day. And so we really want to focus on those residents as well, as we're looking at wellness in the future. And we know that brain health is part of that wellness. And so one of those things that I enjoy today is being able to find ways to improve my life in the new year, to be able to celebrate life, to help my aging process slow down, my cognitive processes improve. And I'm so grateful that we get to have Dr. Rob to share really some great information with us on that. I do want to give you a little bit of a bio on Dr. Rob this morning. Dr. Rob received his PhD in neuroscience from Baylor University. He joined the faculty at Western Oregon University in 2000, where he served as a professor of psychology and gerontology. He was the division chair of the Behavioral Sciences Division, and he has served as the dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences and provost and vice president for academic affairs at Western Oregon University. And I may have said Washington before. I meant to say Oregon. Sorry, Dr. Rob. His scholarship is focused on memory and aging for the past 30 years. He has trained thousands of professionals to offer high-quality cognitive rehabilitation, wellness, and therapy programs. In addition to publishing many peer-reviewed articles in the area of human memory and aging, Dr. Rob has been involved and invited to give well over 1,500 invited presentations about memory and aging at various conferences and workshops. His book, Train Your Brain to Maximize Memory Ability in Older Adulthood, was published by Routledge Publishing, and his latest book is entitled Cranium Crunches, both of which can be found on Amazon. I had the privilege of meeting Dr. Rob in person and listening to his presentation recently at the International Council on Active Aging. So many great pointers, as well as the importance, and we may hear a little bit about that today, about the importance of sleep in our cognitive health. And so a wide variety of areas that Dr. Rob will address today. So Dr. Rob, we are so grateful to have you with us to be presenting on brain health. And we always look forward to everything that you're going to share with us to help us be better in this life. And so I invite you to log in and unmute and be able to join with us today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Angie. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to go to full screen. And it's been a pleasure to work with Prestige. I thought I'd been to the majority of your assisted living communities, but now if you have 43, I might not have quite been to the majority. I've been to about a couple of dozen. And a lot of the things that we're talking about today are available in the prestige communities. And I kind of want to make those connections because I think it is something for us to consider. It's something we always need to be on the cutting edge. And we really have an opportunity to help ourselves, help our loved ones through these types of interventions that we're going to talk about today. So today's presentation is going to be very holistic. You know, I think a lot of people will come and talk about memory and cognition and just focus on one or two variables. But the research is really showing that many factors determine our cognitive ability and how that changes in older adulthood. And so we're going to talk about those. This is fun to share with you. There's a lot of research coming out. I've been in this field for almost 30 years, and I've really watched it develop, and it really feels like it solidifies. We don't get too many surprises in this field, at least in terms of what I'm talking about today. Almost everything I'm sharing with you today is going to be incredibly well grounded in science. So, and I'll talk about how we're moving this forward, but many different factors that we'll discuss. Things that we can do to improve our own quality of life, almost regardless of age. But one of the things before I get in, I need to define a really important neuropsychological term because this is going to come up again and again, and this is kind of at the heart of this research. That term is executive functioning. And I often can't help but touch my frontal lobes, my prefrontal cortices are under here. And this is where executive functioning largely resides. And this is what most of the research we're going to talk about today looks at executive functioning. And it includes a lot. And I think the reason they call it executive functioning, it's like you have an executive that is helping to control where your resources are spent. So executive functioning includes attention, many different types of attention. You could have sustained attention, selective attention, divided attention, alternating attention. So we can study different aspects, but all of those would be part of executive functioning. We also have inhibition. This means not to do something, which is a big part of executive functioning. Some of that is cognitive inhibition. We want to control our distractibility. This is really not a good time to plan your next vacation. This is really not a good time to order a pizza if you want to, listen to me. So we have to control what we think about. But we also have to control our behavior. That's response inhibition. There's certain things we don't want to do. We don't want to eat, a ton of sugar. And if we do, that can have impacts on our cognitive ability. So that sort of behavioral response inhibition, how we behave in a social environment, that is affected by our behavioral or response inhibition. Executive functioning also includes problem solving, reasoning, planning, and then working, or what we used to call short-term memory. That's what you're on your mind at any given moment. And that's what goes awry, when we're in our home and we're walking from one room to another room to get something. That item you're getting is on I like to think of it as a bookshelf, your working memory bookshelf, but you think about other things and it falls off the bookshelf. So these bookshelves don't hold that much. But that is a part of executive functioning. And so I'll just lay it all out right here, right now, and then we'll bore down into these. These are the factors that have been shown to be affected or correlated with dementia risk. And so the big one is genetics. We'll get this out of the way right away. It's about 50%. People argue, is it 40, 45, 50, 55%, but it's in that range. It also probably depends on the type of dementia we're talking about. There are many different types of dementia besides Alzheimer's that has a factor as well. The good news on the genetics is because if you have a parent that had dementia, a sibling that has dementia, and you share on average the same amount of DNA with a parent as a full sibling, we call those first degree relatives. If you have a first degree relative who has experienced dementia, that can be scary. The good news is if that dementia developed later in life, it is probably less genetic. If that dementia is what we call young onset dementia, and where we have significant symptoms before age 65, that unfortunately is more genetic on average. But the good news is young onset dementia is the minority of the cases, maybe 10%. The big one is physical exercise. This is the field that has the greatest number of peer-reviewed studies, the greatest number of randomized controlled studies that can really show cause and effect. Physical exercise is probably the one where we are most certain it has a very significant impact. And that research is still going on, and I'll get really close to kind of where that research is in 2023. This is an important factor, so I'll spend a little bit of time on that. Cognitive stimulation. I've done quite a few studies in this area, and we've shown that a cognitive stimulation intervention can improve executive functioning. By the way, physical exercise, that's what the researchers find too. That's what they look for now, because that's what pops. Physical exercise improves executive function. Stress and kind of a personality characteristic we call neuroticism. It's kind of a personality characteristic that's prone to distress and worry. That puts people at increased risk for dementia. Sleep. Angie mentioned sleep. I gave a talk at a conference recently about that, and this matters. We know that older adults are more likely to have insomnia than other age groups. Maybe 35% of older adults will have some fairly significant sleep problems at some point during older adulthood, and there are things that we can do. So maybe we can come back and do another one of these, and we could just focus on sleep. That would be fun. Social support and engagement, that matters. We know that the older adults, and actually this research actually goes down to middle-aged adults and older adults who are the most socially active are actually less likely to develop dementia. We're not exactly sure why. This is one that's an association or a correlation, and some of you might remember that correlation does not necessarily equal causation. So we always have to take these correlational studies with a little grain of salt, but there is a strong correlation between the level of social support, actually your perceived social support, and your chance of developing dementia. It could be cognitive stimulation, because engaging socially is cognitively stimulating. It could also be related to mood, and it could be that people that have more social engagement are doing some other things that could be helpful. The interesting thing in this research, and we did some studies in this area that were published, it actually doesn't matter how many friends you have. You just need to think you have friends to get all of the benefits. So it's an interesting area. And loneliness, the opposite, is too. It doesn't really matter, how many friends you are. If you think you are lonely, then you'll have the negative impacts of truly being alone. So it's kind of interesting. It's in the eye of the beholder, as is stress. Diabetes and insulin resistance. People love to talk about nutrition. Can you eat your way to better brain health? And that might be possible. That's an area where the research is less clear, and it probably depends on other factors. But one of the biggest nutrition-related factors that can put people at risk is diabetes. There are also some vitamin deficiencies, particularly vitamin B, B as in boy, that can lead to some of the many different types of dementia. You have to watch out for that. Fish oil has been shown to have an effect, is one. And then antioxidants over the course of our life, fruits and vegetables, can have kind of a long-term effect on the health of all of our cells in the body. So that there's some research there, but that's a very long-term effect. In terms of, and we'll go through this a little more, but in terms of some of the physical exercise, yoga, Tai Chi have shown very promising results. Many studies have shown, randomized controlled studies, so we can make some causal conclusions, have shown yoga and Tai Chi can improve executive functioning. And kind of a newer one, in the past decade, a lot of research is beginning to be done on mindfulness training and meditation. Once again, you probably know what I'm going to say, they can improve executive functioning and reduce stress. So they actually have some mediating effects on cognitive ability and chance of developing dementia. There are other health conditions we have to watch out for. Probably the biggest ones are depression and anxiety, and delirium. So if somebody has an infection, somebody has some, the pharmaceuticals are getting out of whack, their body can't metabolize some of the pharmaceuticals that they're taking, it can lead to delirium. that can put people at risk as well. So there are a number of conditions, Parkinson's disease, some other neurodegenerative conditions. So, I really view what we just went through as optimistic. It kind of really makes you think about it. It might seem a little bit stressful thinking about it, but many of those things we can control. And so I really view this research and our ability to take advantage of it in a very optimistic sense. And it affects me. It affects how I live my life and probably some people that are close to me. You can't read this research and say, okay, I need to do more of that. I need to be careful and do less of that other thing. But there's more reason to be optimistic that the prevalence of dementia is coming down in Western society. And that might surprise you because you always hear about more and more cases. So I need to define two terms so we can quickly get into this literature. Prevalence versus incidence. So incidence is what we often talk about. The incidents are the number of cases. And that's what you'll see. You'll see stories on the number of cases of Alzheimer's is expected to rise in the United States or in Western Europe or in the world. And that's true. But that's mostly true because we're going to have, currently we have baby boomers turning, 76 at the rate of about 1 every 8 or 9 seconds. And so we're going to have this large, population cohort go through older adulthood. That's true in many Western countries, people born after World War II. And then it's going to increase in some developing countries where the population is a little bit behind. Their baby boom, if you will, is behind ours. So the number of cases is going to go up, but the prevalence, defined as the proportion of people in a population or a cohort, is going down. Make sense? So the number of cases will go up, but if we look at older adults, if we define that 65 and older, that population is having a decreased proportion. So this is one of the first studies that came out to identify this. It was a long-term, 20-year study. They found a 25% reduction in people 65 and older from 8.3 to 6.2%. And actually, since this is published, the number has probably gone down a little bit more. This is the most recent study I can find in this little subfield. Researchers reported the prevalence of dementia was higher in women than men. We've always known that. But it's interesting, between 2000 and 2016, the difference between women and men shrank because, among men, the prevalence of dementia increased by 3.2%. It had been at 10% in 2000. It's now down to 7%. But the decrease was even larger for women. It had been 13.6%, and it went down now to 9.7. So this is the proportion of people in this study that had dementia, and it's really interesting that proportion has really shrunk now between men and women, which begs the question: why? What's going on here that would cause that? Can we leverage the contributing factor to this decreased proportion of dementia and do more of that? This is what the researchers think might be going on. We're doing a better job controlling for cardiovascular risk factors. When I go in for like many of you, I suspect, when I go in for my annual physical exam, I do a blood workup. One of the first things I look at, one of the first things the doctor looks at, are the cholesterol levels. And if the cholesterol is high, putting me at risk for a cardiovascular incident, the doctor would put me on statin drugs. If I went into the doctor and my blood pressure was high, consistently high, and we couldn't get it down, they would put me on medication to reduce the blood pressure. Those two interventions, particularly the blood pressure, but also probably the cholesterol, will dramatically decrease your chance of having a stroke. And strokes are the cause of the second most common type of dementia, which we refer to as vascular dementia. So we're doing a much better job controlling for this. My grandfather died of a heart attack in 1960, and at a fairly young age. but I'm sure he never had his blood pressure checked. I'm sure he didn't know his cholesterol, and there's some indication he had problems with those afterwards. He would have lived longer, presumably, if with modern medicine. Better education, possibly more cognitive stimulation in the populations now. People in 2016 versus we have compared them to 1990 and 2000. More education, more stimulation, more opportunities like this. 25 years ago, it was harder to find an opportunity like this to learn something new. The other one, which I haven't seen anybody write about this, but there was been a shift in the past 50, 60 years with women going into the workforce. And I don't know if this is the case or not, but when we were looking at the decrease in women from 2016 to 2000, I wonder if the women in the 2016 sample were more likely to have been in the workforce than the 2000 sample, because we do know that the more time you spend in the workforce, the better off you are, particularly if you don't have other things to provide the cognitive stimulation. So that could be a factor. And then just the greater awareness of the importance of physical exercise. It's an incredibly powerful effect on reducing your chance of dementia. An incredibly powerful effect of improving cognitive ability for people who are not at risk for dementia as well. So that could have a factor. Also, just the cognitive stimulation. We have now, there's probably at least 100 studies, that well-designed studies that have shown an intervention to really exercise our cognitive abilities, particularly if they exercise executive functioning, can lead to improvements in executive functioning. And this is important because if we can improve our ability to pay attention, concentrate, avoid distraction, that is going to transfer. That will go beyond the activity you're doing for the cognitive exercise. We'll talk about Sudoku, but we don't want to just get better at doing Sudoku. We want to get better at things that can improve our quality of life, that can allow us to still do the things that we want to do. And here's the deal. This is a very important point. If we improve executive functioning, research has shown then that transfers to things that were never trained. Okay, so that's incredibly important. And we know the opposite is true. When people have significant deficits in executive functioning, then it affects their ability to live independently. They're less able to do the activities of daily living that we all need to do to stay independent. Grooming, eating, things like that, dressing, but also what we call instrumental activities of daily living, things such as paying our bills, and cooking, and shopping. So we see that's impaired when executive functioning is impaired. So if we improve it, it improves our ability to stay independent. This is critically important for our quality of life. One study published in the Journal of Neurology wanted to estimate how much does mental activity, cognitive stimulation, impact changes in the brain and cognitive ability in older adulthood. We have many factors at play, and this set of researchers estimated about 15% of the equation is cognitive stimulation, which is significant, particularly if you think that 50% of the equation is genetics. We only have 50% left over. That's the part we can control. It appears cognitive stimulation is a big part of the part we can control. I always like to share this study. This is from one of my former students, Justin Carr, became a professor and researcher. He conducted a 46-study meta-analysis. And I will mention the word meta-analysis, or is it the words meta-analyses, a number of times in this presentation. What a meta-analysis is when we take peer-reviewed, usually randomized controlled studies where we have a control group and an intervention group, and we combine the data and we look at that. The reason I focus on meta-analyses is because it shows that the research field is mature. This is not a one-off finding, and they often can find other things that might be going on. So I like meta-analyses. And this 46-study meta-analyses on the effects of cognitive training and or physical exercise, they found that both cognitive and physical exercise improved executive functioning. And that's where there's a lot more than 46 studies in this area. This is really well researched. And that makes me think about dual tasking. So dual tasking is when we do a physical activity and a cognitive activity at the same time. So this might be, do I have some examples of this? No. This might be such as, going for a walk and listening to a podcast. It might be going for a walk and talking to a friend, going to a walk and having a conversation on the phone. This is dual tasking, and this is kind of the cutting edge. A lot of research is going on in this space right now. I'm involved with some of that research, so it's an interesting kind of new area, and we're developing some products and some things that can exercise both the physical and the cognitive ability. Really exciting stuff here. So cognitive stimulation, we want to focus on things that exercise attention. And the more we exercise attention in executive functioning, the better we expect the effects to be. And in my experience, doing something like Sudoku is a great example of that. It's a wonderful intervention. I think it might be more effective than crossword puzzles because the level of attention is a little bit is greater, and you're not retrieving old memories. You're paying attention, which is needed to make new memories. So I love Sudoku, and I want to make sure everybody knows how to do it. So the rules for Sudoku, if you don't, is we need to have numbers 1 through 9 in every horizontal row. We need to have numbers 1 through 9 in every vertical column, and then numbers 1 through 9 in every one of these subsquares. So if we look like at the top center subsquare that has 6, 7, 8, 9 in it, you can fairly quickly say it needs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But what goes here, right below the 7? Can you figure that out? Is it 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? Well, it has to be a 5. Because we already have a 5 in this top row, so no 5s can go there. We have a 5 in the third row, so no 5s can go there. We need a 5 somewhere in this subsquare, so it has to go here. Let's look at the very center subsquare. What numbers is it missing? Yeah, the center subsquare is missing 1, 5, and 9. And if you were able to determine that, I didn't give you much time, but if you were able to determine that, that is executive functioning. You had to hold into your working memory the goal of finding all numbers 1 through 9. You had to somehow go through those numbers and then remember as you did 1, 5, and 9 are missing, and then report that. That is executive functioning. So does 5 go into cell A, B, or C? Well, we know it doesn't go into C because we already have a 5 in this column that we just put in. And if you see this 5 down here, the second to the bottom row, we know it doesn't go in the very middle, so it has to go there. Now we're missing 1 and 9. Does 1 go into the very center cell or the one under 2? Yeah, the 1 goes there. It has to because we already have a 1 in this column. And then now a little deductive reasoning tells us 9 goes there. So it's doing things like that that can be quite effective. I do it on my phone. I have an app. I can actually have 4 levels and kind of choose where I am at in the day. The hardest one, it takes a lot of time and it uses a lot of executive functioning. I don't usually get it done in less than 20 minutes, but I can do the easy one. I try to get it done in under 5 minutes. It's mostly just how fast I can touch it and move it. So that is a wonderful activity. Now, physical exercise. Lots of different types of physical exercise. Walking is good. Many of us, that's one of our primary physical exercise. I'm a 10,000 a step a day person. It's as hard as it is at the end of the day. I'll try to get the 10,000 steps in. This time of year, I need to get some in on a treadmill sometimes, but that's a good way to get some physical exercise. This is a real classic study in the field. I remember when this came out, now it's over 20 years ago. This study kind of opened up a lot of research. It was a meta-analysis again. They combined data from a lot of studies, and they found that physical exercise helped people the older they were. And we see this, and this effect has been shown again and again. We actually get this similar effect on cognitive stimulation research, but the older you are, the more physical exercise helps. We're not 100% sure why, but physical exercise seemed to help women more than men. It still helped men significantly, but for some reason it helped women even more. And this is the part that really impacted a lot of future research. In this meta-analysis, they found that mixing aerobic training and strength training together was better than aerobic alone. And, if you think about, a lot of these studies were done in the 90s, maybe even the 80s. A lot of that work was on aerobic training. We didn't think a lot about strength training. That's really changed. And I'll share some research on that. But doing both of those together, and not surprisingly, the length of the program, how long you engage it matters. You're going to get a bigger effect. And if you ever have to stop exercising for a period of time, maybe to go in to have a surgery or something, or you have an illness, then the longer the effects from the exercise will last, the longer you've been doing it. What does physical exercise improve? It's executive functioning. That's what all the researchers assess. And the different ways we can measure executive functioning, but when we look at cognitive abilities, that's what the physical exercise looks at. I paused a little bit because there is a lot of other research on physical exercise and other things. One of the latest studies that just came out, I was telling my wife about this last night on her walk, that if you've been exposed to COVID recently, you exercise at just the right time, probably before you even know you have it, you're actually less likely to be hospitalized. And they think it's actually because if you're exercising, the heart is pumping more, and you can get your full body's immune response to work more effectively, was the hypothesis. Interesting, but a lot of research on physical exercise. Sleep, we went through that one quickly, but sleep can be improved by physical exercise. So that might be a motivation for some of you. So these are the areas of physical exercise that we have researched a lot: aerobic training, strength training. This is huge. Even if it's body supported, just standing up, sitting down, and standing up as many times as you can in a minute. Just do that every day. Count yourself. As many times you can do that in a minute. If you can do push-ups or modified push-ups, great. If you have access to a gym, great. And you can also use TheraBand material. That's that rubbery, stretchy stuff. You can get TheraBand. You can do almost a whole body workout with TheraBand. You can put them around doorknobs and do different things. So there's a lot of videos on that. Or if you have a trainer, they can help you with that. These are things that you would find in a prestige community. You would find the weights, you would find the TheraBand, you would find the classes for aerobic training and strength training. Yoga, Tai Chi are many of the prestige communities that I have visited. Also, high intensity interval training. So this is doing short spurts of intense exercise. This has been shown to be more effective, I should say more efficient. You can actually get the effects or even better effects in less time. So for me, I try to get those 10,000 steps. A lot of times I got to get the last ones at the end of the day. I'll take the dog for a walk and go to a park close to our house. And there's a few areas that are well lit this time of year, and I'll just run 100 yards. The dog loves it. I'm the age I'm not really a runner. But I'll run 100 yards and then I'll stop, and I'll do that a few times as I walk the path around that park. High intensity interval training, and then dual tasking, which we talked about. So, but this is, I just got to go back to this. There's some really significant effects on the strength training. The researchers that looked at having, and these were older adults, do once a week or twice a week resistance training. So it was lifting light weights for not very long, could even be 20 minutes once or twice a week. 11% improvement in executive functioning after 1 year. This is huge. If you're, well, heck, even if you're middle adulthood or older adulthood, to have a significant improvement in executive functioning, we don't usually see that. It's just because we're actually going to have an ever so slight decrease in executive functioning, throughout middle adulthood and older adulthood, unfortunately. So to get a bump like that, just doing 20 minutes of strength training is huge. It's on the order of what you would get with the very best pharmaceutical that would try to help this, but without the side effects. And you can still add that pharmaceutical later in life. Looks like once a week gets us most of the way there. There wasn't that much more of an improvement for twice a week. But for people that have mild cognitive impairment, this is a diagnosis you can have. It's one step away from dementia. And quite a few people, it's almost 20% of people with mild cognitive impairment will develop diagnosable dementia in the next year. I think I saw 80% will get it within the next 6 years. So it's a risk factor, but it's the sweet spot. We can help people with mild cognitive impairment a lot more than we can help somebody who has mid-stage dementia. But in this one, actually, it's a similar researcher, different lab, but some of the same people. They did twice a week resistance training in women who had mild cognitive impairment, and it was a significant increase. These are people that would have progressed on at a 20% rate to dementia. They actually, on average, had a significant improvement. So that's why I get so excited about this. It's hard, though, if you've never done strength training, if you've never lifted weights, if you've never done body supported, weight supported exercise, you have to learn how to do it, but good reason to do so. And it's things like that in a lot of the prestige communities and similar types of communities where you have experts trained in this. Now, one of the things that I mean, this hopefully is a very optimistic presentation based on the research, but I need to tell you that all these things I'm really excited about that we can do, they're not effective when, in most cases, to prove executive functioning when you have mid-stage dementia or late-stage dementia. I'll say this again, it's really important. Those interventions I've talked about that can improve executive functioning, to my observations, they don't work when people have full-blown dementia. But we can still improve quality of life with the physical exercise. In this study, they had people who were in memory care communities, so fairly advanced dementia. And just by offering them an opportunity to do some physical exercise with a fitness trainer in the community, it actually saved $12,000 a year to care for them. And that's on average. That's for people who didn't really engage that, but they just had the opportunity to. And they went to their rooms, they asked them, I brought some equipment here, I'm the trainer, and would you exercise with me? And the researchers think this was because the memory care residents were more independent. They're better able to groom themselves, to get to the bathroom, to feed themselves. I mean, if you can get to the bathroom and feed yourselves, not only will you have greater dignity, you're actually going to need less care. And that's where so much cost was associated, savings was associated. They used a PT test called the FEM motor. They actually were more mobile. And the researchers hypothesized they were less likely to experience other comorbidities that can affect their health. So it's even effective when it gets later. We won't be improving executive functioning, but we could be improving mobility, making it safer and greater independence. Tai Chi, I talked about this. Tai Chi, there are meta-analyses now. There's enough research, and the Tai Chi has been shown to improve executive functioning. Yoga, there's enough for meta-analyses, more than enough for meta-analyses, and you could finish my sentence, right? Significant improvements in executive functioning. It's interesting to look at yoga. I love doing yoga. I did it most days when we were working from home during the pandemic. And yoga has been shown to have increased focus because you do have to, focus on your breath when you're doing the moves. And actually, if you do a lot of focus on your breath, so for example, breathe in and your arms go up and then breathe out. A movement like that where you're combining the movement with a cognitive attention to the breath, that's actually dual tasking. You can tap into some of those benefits as well. It can reduce stress. And then depending on how you do the aerobics. There's different kinds. There's some power aerobics that you really increase the heart rate. A lot of aerobics are strength. Even just getting up and down off the mat, it can really increase strength. So depending on how you do it, you can get those benefits as well. So when we talk about, the many factors, it probably is worthwhile talking about stress. Stress has increased since pre-pandemic in our society. The good news is older adults often experience less stress. And they also, there's a lot of research on, I don't really follow this too closely, but I know there's a lot of research on as we enter older adulthood, our perspectives become more positive. We see things, the bright side of things. So there's interesting research on that. But the stress can still have an impact. And stress, I want to say stress sometimes can be good. It can motivate us to do things we need to do. But if the stress is too great, sorry about that typo there, it should be TOO. If the stress is too great, and that's in the eye of the beholder, right? What one person finds stressful, another person finds enjoyable. But if the person perceives the stress as being too great, that can affect not only our physical health, but also our mental health. A recent study followed middle-aged adults for a 10-year period of time, and they would check in with them. They actually would text them, and they would rate their level of stress and daily hassles during that period. And the people that had more daily stress, more daily hassles over that 10-year period of time had developed greater memory impairment by the end of the study. Other studies that have found experiencing more stress is associated with greater chance of developing dementia. And one of the reasons we think this might be the case is because of the hormone cortisol. Cortisol is released when we're stressed. It impairs our immune functioning, causes us to retain fat right around the midsection, but it's also been shown to damage our cells. And it actually shortens the life expectancy of your cells, particularly towards the end of life. It accumulates throughout your life and towards the end, and that can also impact memory ability and a lot of other things. So what do? Mindfulness training or meditation has shown a lot of promise. This is one of these fields that, I watch these fields, they go for 10 years, people do the research and then they're on to something else. This is one that's really hot right now, a lot of research coming out. Most of it's randomized controlled studies. So they have an intervention group that does meditation. They have a control group that doesn't. We can measure differences over time and be fairly certain when we see that meditation improves executive functioning, reduces stress, reduces anxiety. We're pretty certain that the meditation caused it because of how we set that study up. So if you don't do this, lots of ways to learn about it. My son and I, he's almost a teenager, we have done many just videos, YouTube videos, and we meditate together. He really enjoys doing that. And I know why he enjoys I think I know why he enjoys doing that, hopefully because he's doing it with his dad a little bit, but you feel so good at the end of it. At the end of doing that, I mean, it's blissful many times. It's quite addicting. There's also apps that are available. So if you do an internet search on mindfulness apps or meditation apps, there's some good products out there. So both aerobic exercise and mindfulness training have been shown to reduce stress levels. It's probably not surprising to you at this point in the presentation, or I suspect many of you knew this beforehand, but there's research to support that. And then the final thing that I'll end on, other ways to reduce stress is just to reduce exposure to stressful situations. And this is, if you went to talk to a counselor, this might be a technique that they would use, is to report levels of stress, maybe to keep a journal. What was going on beforehand? What happened during the day? What happened right before? We call those antecedent conditions, what was happening right before. And we want to remove those. For me, I learned a long time ago, I was trained as a neuropsychologist. We talked a lot about stress. Back in the 80s, we talked a lot about the effects of stress on heart health, but that field has moved along. But I just remember a lot of psychology classes when I was a student talking about the negative impacts of stress. And we knew right away that you wanted to reduce those stressful situations. And for me, I noticed that I get stressed when I think I'm going to be late for something. And so, or when I hit traffic, that's just like, gosh, it just, and then I don't like the person I become. So I just become one of those people a long time ago that I just leave early. I show up and I have things to do. If I get there a little early, I'm never stressed. The only downside is we leave to the airport before my wife wants to. So we all have compromises, right? So, in summary, I hope it's clear that participating in cognitively stimulating activities is associated with decreased likelihood of developing dementia. And if you want more of these, my workbook, Cranium Crunches workbook, is on Amazon. These cognitively stimulating activities may delay the need for more intensive care, can increase our independence. But the physical exercise, adequate sleep, controlling diabetes, talk to your doctor about adding fish oil into your diet, social engagement, and get the right types of physical exercise. If you are a walker already, try to mix in some dual tasking. If you're a good and dedicated walker already, please consider adding the strength training. So I challenge you. I've given you a lot of ideas, and you're up to speed on this field for 2023. I challenge you. What are you going to do for your brain health this year? Which one of these things do you want to do more of, or a risk factor that you want to remove from your life? And I challenge you to do that. I challenge you to tell somebody, a loved one, that this is your goal, and follow up on that. So that's the presentation, and I think we have some time for questions if any have come in.
Dr. Rob, we do have one question from Mark in the chat session. If you do have a question, you can type it in the chat or in the Q&A at the bottom or top of your screen. Mark asked, what is the significance of adding in resistance training to just walking?
So it's a very significant effect. And so if you, and it's actually, the question is insightful, because one of the things that the Mark might be thinking is, if I'm doing the walking, if I'm doing the aerobic training, will I get an extra benefit beyond that with the physical exercise? And the researchers have looked at that. The benefit from the strength training is independent, completely independent from the benefit of the walking or the aerobic training. So they're additive. And the reason that is it appears that they're activating different brain-derived neurotrophic factors. They're kind of like growth hormones for the brain. And so walking and strength training are literally doing different things. But both of those are leading to, what they're doing is greater connections amongst the neurons, more new neurons in the hippocampi, and also greater angiogenesis, greater vascularization in some parts of the brain with the physical exercise. That's what those growth hormones do.
Thank you. We had another question. Do you have recommendations for fitness for those with limited mobility?
Well, Angie, I suspect you have some people in your communities that could do a great job answering that and showing that. But you might want to talk about some of the things you're doing. But I know we have some, we often have, chair aerobics or chair yoga. So there are things that can be done in the chair with limited mobility. You can be sitting down and be handed 2-pound weights and sitting in the chair. You can be sitting down. You can actually do dual tasking sitting in the chair. We could be learning to music, kicking our left leg up, then our right leg up, then our left leg up, or you need to mirror the instructor doing that. We also have chair yoga that can be done. So a lot of things. Sometimes we want to just kind of get the heart rate up too. So we'll have like there's a term for this, I'm forgetting, but the cycle, but it's for your hands, and you can get your heart rate up pretty good with that. So yeah, there are things that can be done, and that's one of the nice things. Most things somebody says, there's also chair Tai Chi. I love it. Depending on what the limitation is for the individuals, many group-based classes, and also videos. So just go into YouTube and you can find some videos of that.
Right. And I will mention, in our communities, we do what is called Ageless Grace. Denise Medved is the creator of that. And all of our communities have someone who is trained to provide Ageless Grace classes during the weeks. In the month of February, we are offering free classes to those who want to visit our communities. It is a seated program. It's done to music and wide variety of different kinds of music, and moving the body in different ways than what you're used to, in a safe way, but it opens up that neuroplasticity in the brain. And we found such success with it. And our residents, they just love it. We have our independent, our assisted living, our memory care residents, they all participate in Ageless Grace. And you can go to prestigecare.com to find a location near you. And there will be a schedule out there for that location of classes when they're offered throughout the week, as well as you can call the community to see about coming in and attending one of those classes. We do find that they are a lot of fun, lots of giggles and joy, but really that help the body, the core, as well as the brain. We do have a few more questions here. Let me see what we haven't. When it comes to sleep, are daytime naps a positive or a negative for cognition?
Oh, one of my favorite questions. So thank you for asking that. So, it probably depends on a lot of these answers. It depends, but I'll tell you about some of the research and kind of the history of this suggestion. Many of you have probably heard the suggestion to improve your sleep quality, you should avoid naps. The research doesn't necessarily support that, though. What the research has found is that, and they just say, do you nap or not? This hasn't been broken down, because you can take a 20-minute power nap is very different from a brain standpoint than a 90-minute nap, which is actually different than a 3-hour nap. Different things are happening in the brain. But the research has shown that older adults who take naps, while they sleep fewer hours or minutes at night is not a large amount, but they do sleep a little less at night if they have napped during the day, their overall sleep in a 24-hour period is greater. So napping can be good. What you have to watch out, though, for with napping is to not kind of perpetuate the insomnia. You probably don't want to take more than, you certainly don't want to, in my opinion, unless you're really sleep deprived, you wouldn't want to take more than a 2-hour nap. A 90-minute nap can be good because you go through all of your cycles of sleep, even an REM cycle when you were likely to dream. And so that can be good. The downside is it's really hard to wake up after a 90-minute nap when you've gone through all of your cycle, because you'll get what's called sleep momentum and you'll want to go into the next cycle. So if you're disciplined, you kind of get up, that can be good. For some people, the 20-minute power nap can be effective. The power nap does not have the same benefits in that you don't go through all the cycle, but it has been shown to increase vigilance, make people safer for driving, for example. So generally napping appears to be good, but you don't want, if it seems like it's affecting nighttime sleep too much, more than say 15 minutes, then you might be doing too much of it or doing it too late in the day.
Very good. Thank you. Let's see, from Marcia, we have, when does one determine mild dementia as opposed to a more advanced dementia?
Yeah, another good question. All of these are, when we go from, a little worse memory than you would like for your age, to mild cognitive impairment, to early stage dementia, mid, late stage, and there's different ways for us to label that. But most of us believe that is all along one continuum. And so when we give these labels, we're really just labeling shades of gray, if you will. Is it really gray, or is it light gray? So I wouldn't get too hung up on these terms. But we do have some diagnostic criteria that try to help people make those determinations. And most of those diagnostic criteria will look at how much is the cognitive impairment negatively affecting quality of life? How much is it affecting your ability to socialize, your ability to live independently, your ability to do activities of daily living, They mentioned language, that's a big one. How much is it affecting you? And that's where we get these different diagnoses. Sometimes it'll be scores on a test as well will give us the different labels that we use. One of the things that's important to point out in this context is we always measure behavior we can see. We don't make these diagnoses and say, is it early to mid, by looking at the neurophysiology. And if we have more reserve, if we have improved our executive functioning before we had a problem, that will allow us to even have a little bit of the disease of dementia in the brain, the neuropathophysiciology, without showing signs of the problem. So it can actually delay the symptoms. And that really is our goal for independent older adults.
Thank you. Another question that we have is, can you speak to the research on cognition and the brain and gut health and eating non-inflammatory foods and being referred to as type 2 diabetes?
Wow, these are great questions.
They are.
We take all these questions and do another presentation. So yeah, on the gut brain biome, it's not an area of research I follow closely, but I am aware of it, and I think there are at least some connections, maybe more, that I'm not aware of. It is kind of it's a growing field. It's a fairly young field. But the interesting thing about, and this might be surprising to some people, the health of your gut bacteria has a really strong impact on anxiety and depression. And we've even seen specifically social anxiety. And anxiety and depression can impact memory ability. So and I think that's a fairly robust effect on those mental health outcomes. So if nothing else, if through the anxiety and depression, it can affect cognition. It could be that there's more there that the researchers haven't found yet, or that I haven't discovered in the research, but there is a relationship there. The other part of that question, it talked about type 3 diabetes, which is kind of almost a kind of a made up term, but I've seen it. Type 3 diabetes, Alzheimer's has been called type 3 diabetes because our sugar intake, or refined carbohydrate intake, has a strong impact on insulin resistance and diabetes. And if people have prediabetes or diabetes, it will impact executive functioning. It'll even impact executive functioning on a middle-aged adult. So just the link between sugar and Alzheimer's is so strong that some people have started to refer to Alzheimer's as type 3 diabetes.
Thank you. Then we have the question, what is the best specialist to see when it comes to cognition and diagnoses? Is it a neurologist? Is it a neuropsychologist?
Wow, this is another great question. But before I answer that, I'll say I like this question because it is reminding us to go see somebody if we have concerns. And importantly, pragmatically, this is needed because we need to know where you are today. We need to get a baseline. It's very difficult to figure out what's going on when somebody comes in to see a professional. We can give them a test, but we don't know what that test means. At that point, if we only have one test, we can only compare it against all the other people that have taken the test. So we could say, okay, you're 50 percentile, you're right in the middle. So I guess that's no problem. But if you have been 99 percentile, you're really smart. You're smart. You're in a group of 100 people, you're likely to be the smartest or something like that. And then you went down to 50 percentile, that would be a significant decrease. And we'd want to know that. Or maybe somebody comes in and they're at the 20 percentile, but they've always been at 20 percentile, where they would score better than only 20 people out of 100. Then we don't know, and we could actually make some wrong diagnoses, some wrong recommendations. So really, in my mind, the most important thing is to get a baseline test, even if it's a very simple cognitive screening tool that we can follow up later. And I think this is something that Prestige, can do, is they'll be able to track this, keep track of your your slum score or your MMSE, a couple of the more popular screening tools over time. But to answer the question, part of it might be whoever that you can get an appointment with. It is very difficult to get appointments with neurologists or neuropsychologists, especially those that specialize in geriatric medicine. So I think a geriatric specialist they can do better, but both a neuropsychologist and a neurologist can be effective. The neuropsychologist might be able to take a little broader perspective and say, these other factors might be affecting what you're seeing in your life. The neurologist, depending on their training, because a neuropsychologist can be an MD or a clinical psychologist, the MDs can sometimes work on medication management as well. So they kind of have their pros and cons, but it's largely you want somebody that has experience with older adults and you just want an appointment, period.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Robin. Yes, we do. In all of our communities, we are able to do those slums assessments. We do cognitive screenings for those that would like to have those to kind of give you an idea of where you are on that score line, and seeing where we can help you and provide resources for you. It's something that we do for our residents, sometimes a quarterly, sometimes a yearly basis, to check, where they are on that timeline, on that brain line, to make sure that we are offering the best engagement and the best resources, and also resources for physicians and so forth. It's something that we stay on top of at all times with our residents, and we are happy to offer those within our communities. I have seen a couple folks raise their hands, and I would ask, if you do have a question, if you might be able to type it in the chat or in the Q&A for us to answer that for you. We are coming at the end of our time for our webinar. We do have one more question from Janelle. Is there a simple test to determine if you are just forgetful or if you're heading for dementia?
There are simple tests. I don't know if they can reliably tell us if you're forgetful or heading for dementia. The test that Angie mentioned, the SLUMS, it actually stands for St. Louis University Memory Scale. It's a good one that just takes 5 minutes or so, maybe 10. That kind of gives us a real sense if we need to do follow-up testing. So simple tests can kind of get us in the right direction. But to kind of get at what I think you're asking, Janelle, a little bit is, how do we tell the difference between forgetfulness and dementia? One is the impact on your life. I forget things sometimes. I'll walk downstairs, like, what did I come down here for? I forgot something. This is normal. We all do that. That is not dementia. But if it gets to the point where it affects your ability to live independently, others are concerned about it. Also, if it's getting worse or slowly over time, or it can even get worse very quickly. For example, if somebody had a stroke, then that would be problematic. Some of the things, and I think a lot of people kind of manage their money and finances a little differently. But one common telltale sign has been the inability to manage a checkbook. Has been something that we consistently see kind of pop. They're still fairly independent. They could manage their checkbook a decade ago. They can't manage it now. That would be a sign. So we look for these things where we start seeing it affects their ability to live independently, do the things that they had done before. It's also hard to answer that question because we see different symptoms in different types of dementia as well. And so that kind of needs to be factored in.
And we also had a question as far as, does alcohol affect your memory?
I have an answer, but I'm starting to doubt my answer as more research comes in. So this is a field, this has been challenging to look at. There was a study that followed 3,000 people for almost their whole adult life. It's called the Rotterdam study, if you wanted to look it up. And other studies were consistent. What they found in that study was the answer I've given for the past decade. I'll tell you that, but I'll tell you why I'm beginning to doubt it a little bit. The Rotterdam study found that that people that drank, certainly if you drink more, if you say you drink 3 or more drinks a day, you are more likely to get dementia. It's quite significant increase for people that are heavier drinkers. Actually, one of the many types of dementia is called Korsakoff syndrome, which is alcohol-related dementia. So you can actually get a type of dementia related to heavy drinking. But the Rotterdam study results found that people that had an average of one drink most days of the week were actually less likely to get dementia than people that never drank or those that drank a lot. And that's what I've been sharing the results. It was a large study, thousands of people for many years. But since then, I've seen an analysis of that work. People have talked about it, and they pointed out in the Rotterdam study, people that were alcoholics that quit drinking were in the no drinking group. So it could have been they're in the no drinking group, but maybe they drank very heavy and had some of that damage to the brain that could kind of lead to alcohol-related dementia. But now they're in the no drinking group. So that study I have less confidence in. And I saw a study just came out yesterday showing that no drinking at all was throughout the course of their life was one of, I think it was 6 factors they found, all of which we talked about in this study, except smoking, which I think I mentioned briefly. Those 6 factors had the maximal decrease in dementia prediction. So I think we need to do more research on the alcohol. I've probably raised more questions than provided answers on that one. Sorry.
No, thank you very much. We will have this as our last question of the day, because you did talk about sleep. And so the question is, how much does sleep apnea affect cognitive brain health and dementia?
Yeah, sleep apnea, as I suspect many of you know, this is when we almost stop breathing for a period of time when we sleep. We have very high sleep apnea rates in the United States because not always, but it is associated with being overweight. But certainly people who are not overweight can have sleep apnea. Sometimes the sleep apnea is called central sleep apnea because the brain is causing this. Sometimes it's called obstructive sleep apnea because when you relax, the weight of the throat and the jaws will close the breathing pathway. Sleep apnea will worsen your cognition. And this will probably happen for adults really of any age. How do you know if you have sleep apnea? Well, we believe that about half the people that have clinically diagnosable sleep apnea do not have a diagnosis. It is underdiagnosed. But the reason people often will go in is because a loved one, a bed partner, just can't sleep with them. The snoring is too loud. So snoring is an indication of that. They stop breathing and then they wake up gasping for breath. It will impact cognition. I haven't seen studies on worsening dementia, but I'm fairly confident it would worsen dementia. The good news is, though, either through the CPAP machine, continuous positive airway into the breathing pathways at night, or even what they call a mouth appliance. You know, we can actually have people wear something in like a retainer type of situation, and that moves their jaw and they're less likely to have sleep apnea. That has been associated with significant improvements in cognitive ability. So great reason to talk to your doctor and get that treated.
Thank you. I will mention that we will be sending out the slides for Dr. Rob's presentation today, as well as a recording of the presentation. We are so grateful, Dr. Rob, for you being with us today, sharing your expertise, but most importantly, your heart for this information and the impact that it has on our world. We have learned so much from you today, and so we're so grateful for that.
Oh, thank you, Angie. It was a lot of fun.
I will remind everyone to please visit our landing page at prestigecare.com for upcoming information and resources. On March 23rd at 2 p.m., we do have a webinar coming up with our consultant, Adrian Cahigas. It's all called Worried About Falling. We do this campaign every year because we find that more and more adults are having that question asked. in a physician's office. They are experiencing more falls in life, not getting that exercise to help with the brain and the balance aspects of their physicality. And so we want to address this important subject. So once again, on March 23rd at 2 p.m., we will be hosting that webinar. You can go to, like I said, our landing page, sign up for that, as well as check out those free Ageless Grace classes throughout the month of February at our communities. Once again, thank you all for being with us today. We hope that you found all of the information very beneficial, that you will take it with you, that you will think on it, and that you'll choose to make at least one change in the new year to be better with health physically and to help with your brain cognitively, and be able to look at the new year with hope and with joy and a way to move forward with all that you've learned today. And please reach out to us at any time at prestigeterror.com if you have any questions. Our email is available for those of us that work in this field, and we would be glad to help you in any way that we can. So thanks again for attending. Thank you, Dr. Rob, and we'll see you next time.